Welcome back to Suwalif Space. Today we are exploring something many of us experience every single day, the so-called availability culture. It's that constant pressure to be online, ready to respond, hustling around the clock. At first glance, it may feel like dedication, but underneath it often leads to burnout, blurred boundaries, and the illusion of productivity. To help us unpack this, we are joined by Kristen Coakley, partner and leadership consultant at Fluid Moves International. Kristen has seen firsthand how this culture affects both workplace and employees. Together, we will explore why organizations encourage it and how employees internalize it, and what can be done to create healthier boundaries. This is a conversation about work, life, and the myth we tell ourselves about success. Welcome to the show.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. We start with the first question. From an HR perspective, how do you see availability culture?
I mean, from an HR perspective, availability culture is something that can be kind of built in. So it's one of those, I guess, unwritten or silent kind of things that creeps into the workplace. We often spend a lot of money creating cultures, branding around what the environment is like, but it's not about all of the flashy stuff. It's really about the silent practices, the day-to-day, what leaders do, how they respond to things, what's expected of employees, and a lot of that is unwritten. So culture within organizations is so incredibly important to creating or not creating availability culture, because it's about trust.
Do you think companies unintentionally encourages availability culture?
I think a lot of companies do, and I think it's been a really natural creep as we see technology blurring the boundaries between home and work. We also see the impact of COVID, which has had a knock-on effect, with people having to move into their homes, working from home, some companies still having that hybrid situation. So in some ways that's been helpful, in that it's forced people who are working from home to create boundaries, but it's also highlighted where individuals or organizations are not doing that very well. The manager who sends an email at 10 p.m. might not expect an immediate response, but an employee may not know that. And so responding once, twice, until it becomes a culture is sort of that slide that naturally comes into expectations around being available all the time.
But why do you think managers encourages this type of hustle?
I think there's an element of, we think that what's good for business is for things to be done immediately, and that everything is urgent, and every single task or everything that we need done has to be done in the moment, instead of stopping to pause and evaluate, actually, is this a task for tomorrow, or is this really as urgent as I think it is? So I think we've gotten into that fast pace, and the Middle East is really, really well known for this. I think so many of us who work in the Middle East for a long time know it's a very fast-paced culture. Even when I got here 20 years ago, people always said, you work hard, but you play hard. And there's that expectation that you go all in. You put yourself, and you're in your company, you're working hard, you're here to make money, you're here to move ahead in your career, and that comes with a certain kind of pressure to prove ourselves. And managers and organizations have reaped the benefits of that to some extent, in that they've got really hard workers, people who are willing to dedicate the time and put in all that extra effort. And now that we've got the technology, the resources at our fingertips, well, they can do that at all times.
Well, from your experience, what are the signs that comes along with this burnout that happens because of availability culture?
Yeah, I think what we see is that burnout kind of creeps in, and a lot of that comes from our mindset, right? Because we, I'm just a little bit tired, I just need a little bit of time to recuperate, or they send me an email while I'm on leave and I'll just respond to that. So, burnout can kind of creep in a similar way that availability culture does, and I think most of us just keep pushing. I can just do a little bit more. It's fine. I'll just, I'll work hard now, but I'll rest on the weekend, or I'll rest on my holiday, but then something else comes up, and we just push and push and push until we almost hit the wall. So burnout can kind of seem like it's undercover until it's almost too late. But I would say that the trend in recognizing that has been, there's a lot more talk about burnout. There's a lot more awareness of that, which is positive, because I think the more we talk about it, the more people start to recognize early symptoms. But it can look like disengagement, it can look like tiredness, it can look like kind of losing interest in some of the things that we've always been passionate about, wondering about, what's worthwhile or what's worth our energy. And so some of those kinds of things can start to show up, and if we're not paying attention, they can go unnoticed until it's almost too late.
But I mean, as you explained, sometimes we do feel the pressure that we have to respond. It might be that the manager don't expect us to respond to this email or message at this time. So wouldn't that be more of a personal habit or a choice?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. So let me ask you a question. If you've got your WhatsApp open,
right,
and you've got 50 messages showing up there, there's a certain pressure that comes from saying, oh my gosh, there's 50 messages in there. There's a pressure or a need that we have to look at that. And that's very psychological for everyone. So I think,
I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Right? So there's something like that even if we're not checking it, right? If you know your manager has sent you an email and you can see it sitting there, and you say, I'm not going to check that. When you go to sleep, that's weighing on the back of your mind. You know it's there. Yeah. So because we have this technology that makes everything accessible and available in our pocket, we can see it. It also means that whether we check it or we don't check it, whether we do the work or we don't do the work that's been asked of us in that moment, it's still there, right? It's something that we carry with us. We carry it on our shoulders. We know it's there. Right? So, and we can't unsee it. So we can't go back in time and say, I didn't see it. And we can't eliminate that because it is there and we're aware of it. And that awareness is what also creates the pressure.
Do you have an example where this situation has led into a burnout or
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think everyone sees that differently. But what you see is that some cultures, there's a constant expectation of being on, right? Or an idea that, this profession requires 24/7 availability, right? Or they pay me enough money that I should be available 24/7, right? So there are certain professions that we see that's sort of ingrained. Consulting is one of those, sometimes in the legal profession. So we see certain professions where there is that expectation, right? But I think, it's something that can come to anyone. I mean, I can honestly say that I've gotten there where, you think you're just clearing things, you're trying to, get jobs out of the way to make things easier, but then it creeps and you end up doing a little bit more in the evening, a little bit more after the kids go to bed, a little bit in the moments of downtime in between things, until it's creeped into everything and you feel like you're on your phone all the time checking things. And I think that's something that probably 90% of us naturally end up falling into those patterns. And unless we're really strong with our boundaries and push back on it, and constantly reinforce them, because like I said, that slide is there. You can have the best boundaries, but if you slide, you've got to be able to reinforce them and come back to them. So it takes not just one person to say, these are my boundaries. It takes the management, it takes the leadership, it takes the whole organization, all the people in it to reinforce that culture.
So it's just like you mentioned, it's a cultural thing. It could be the culture of the organization that they don't respond after working hours. It's a norm. So someone can say that it depends on the organizational culture.
It does, but the thing is, again, you've got to really look at organizational culture. So it's easy to say, if we send emails in the evening, don't respond to them. But if at 9 o'clock you're asking for an immediate response without giving people time to look into it or do the task, then you have expected them to check it the night before, right? So it's subtle in that it's not just me saying to you, if I send you an email at 10 o'clock, don't respond to it until tomorrow. If I then come in at 9 o'clock and say to you, like, where's your write-up? Have you done this proposal? Or have you done what I asked you to do, but I've not given you the time to do it, then I did expect that. So it's the unwritten expectations that are also there. And I think that takes conscious action from everyone involved to make sure that those boundaries are there, that the communication has happened, right? To say, okay, look, I am going to send messages, or I am going to send this, I don't expect that, and I will give you until tomorrow at noon, right? Or something like that. Or, as we talked about before, we have these amazing tech tools, we can schedule our emails. So if I think of something at 10 o'clock at night, and I think, gosh, it doesn't need to be done till tomorrow, but I don't want to go to sleep with it on the back of my mind, I can send an email and schedule it for 9 a.m., which means that I'm actually not disturbing you at all. I'm not leaving that on your mindset thinking about it, and I've got peace of mind to know that it's sent out and it's scheduled. So we can use those things.
I think it's also sometimes if we're talking about teammates, not maybe manager employee relationship, there's a certain type of competition as well. The person might say, like, I've sent you the email yesterday. Yes, they have sent it yesterday at 12 midnight.
Yes, and I think again that's boundaries, right? Yeah. So giving people the trust within the organization to say, I can complete this, but this is when I can complete it, or pushing back, or expecting that if we expect nothing to be done in the evening when people are having family time or rest time to offset from their work, then we're not expecting them to send it post, let's say 6 p.m. or there's no expectation of that. So if there's peer competition, it shouldn't be like I sent it at 12:59, so it was still yesterday, right? There should be an expectation that it couldn't be done before work clocked out today, so it would be sent the next day anyways. And I think that leads into a broader conversation about whole organizations, right? So, how do we do that? It's so many different pieces. It's the management saying we don't send emails or we schedule them for the morning. It's people, and I work with a lot of leaders and professionals to say, the first 6 months of a new job is a fantastic time to set precedent, to set boundaries, to set expectations. But what happens, particularly in the Middle East, where we have like a 3-month or 6-month probation period, is that we go in, we want to prove ourselves, we want to create impact fast because everybody wants results yesterday, and we go in 200%. We're available all the time, we work on the weekend, we want to get things done, we think that we've got to show results in like a week because that will make us a high flyer and that's what success looks like. And we don't give ourselves the time to say, it's going to take me 6 months. I'm going to network. I'm going to build relationships. I'm going to learn the company. I'm going to learn the role. I'm going to do the research and get to know the clients and what's necessary before I start creating impact. And if we go into a new role doing that, then there's no drop at 6 months where that person who was giving 200% and was available all the time, all of a sudden isn't available all the time and the management thinks they're not working. And then that's where that also comes in, that unwritten culture.
It becomes the expectation.
It does, yeah.
But do you see that different between different generations? Like, let's say the younger generation, do they handle this type of let's say expectation differently than the older generation?
I mean, I think recent research has shown, McKinsey research has shown that actually the differences in expectations across generations is actually more similar than we think. But what I would say is that when we look at studies and we look at research, the younger generation feels the pressure about those blurred lines between work and life a little bit harder, right? It's a little bit more pressure. And now that may come into being, the youngest in a company coming in. So we may see that consistently happens with kind of all new generations that come into the workplace where you've got older generations or leadership that is older. So that might be an element that plays into it as well. But because they've grown up with the technology, whereas my generation did not grow up with the technology available 24/7. You went to work. If somebody needed to reach you, they had to wait till you got home because they had to call you. And they knew it was intruding because they spoke to you on the telephone, right? So it was a little bit different. Whereas now you can send a text message or a WhatsApp or an email in the background, and they're used to having that instant response. So there is a lot more pressure with the younger generation, I think, to do that. But there's also a lot more pressure and awareness that they need to build in boundaries.
But throughout your HR experience and history, have you come across such a situation where the generational gap has created that difference in expectation?
I mean, I think it's always kind of underlying in that. I mean, I think in the Middle East you do have sort of quite a young population in general. I think just naturally as expats, I mean, Dubai has changed slightly over the years because obviously it's become a more attractive place for more generations. But I do think you still have a particularly young workforce in the Middle East in general, both local population and expats. So if we look at that, there will be a divide in expectations a little bit around, how we work, how fast we respond. And I think more literature as well. We've got this 5 a.m. club, these books that are being written about how you should get up at 5 a.m. and respond, and that is impacting culture as well. I think there is a difference between Gen Z and the next one because of the way they've grown up, because of that the way they use technology, the accessibility and the experience that they have with technology. And I think technology is the greatest trend that we've seen to blur the lines between home and work. Because as that's come through, they've grown up with that integrated into their lives. So there's an expectation that there isn't always on. Whereas I think older generations have seen the difference, can see the trends, to see how things are changing, and I think that maybe is the difference that's happening there.
Okay. Well, let's say, for example, an employee is placed in a culture where they expect them to be available all the time. Have you seen a situation where they have pushed back in a way that did not jeopardize their career and they were successful?
Yeah, I mean, I have seen that. And I think coming off the back of COVID, I think there was a lot of conversations around that, around how we can set those boundaries. So if people are working from home versus being in the office. So I think that sparked a lot of those conversations. But I think, what I've seen work is having those conversations early. Like I said, if you start a new role and you're very open about the communication to say what's expected, if I get emails at night, am I expected to respond to them? This is the turnaround, and learning to push back on those boundaries in a really steady way, while still showing impact, right? So still showing results while setting those boundaries early on. That's a really successful way to make sure that they're maintained, right?
So would you say that's more of a personal trait, a strategy, or just luck?
Yeah, no, I think that's a strategy. I think most times we go straight in and we don't think about it, and that's kind of what leads us and causes problems. Right. But I mean, the coaching clients that I work with, where we set strategies to set boundaries right from the beginning, so the first 6 months, they've got a clear plan about what those boundaries are, when they're going to be available, when they will be checking their emails, so that they've communicated that openly with their managers, with their peers, with their teams, with their clients. Those are the people who are much happier in the way that they've got their boundaries set up, right?
And what advice would you give to someone facing this kind of challenge, whether if they're the manager or an employee?
Well, I mean, as a manager, what I would say is it starts with you, right? So start looking at how you are interacting with the people around you, right? Scheduling emails. Don't send emails past a certain time. Use your calendar. Put out of office times in the evening. If you're not going to be available from 6 p.m. onwards, put that as out of office every day. Use that as an additional technology buffer to help you manage that. And then have really clear communication and conversations with your team about what's expected. What types of things are urgent. What types of things need a call or need an email for tomorrow, so that expectation is set. And by starting with your team, that has the opportunity to ripple outwards. As an employee, again, I work with a lot of clients. It's about really thinking about what are my boundaries, right? It may not be that, look, I'm never going to answer an email past 6 p.m. because that's not feasible with my company, but it might be, I have young kids and I'm not going to be available or respond to things between 5 p.m. and 8 because I put my children to sleep and I want the evenings with them. Or Saturdays are off. I don't respond to anything on Saturdays, but Sunday I have a little bit more flexibility if something is, critical and you need to talk to me. So, thinking about where our hard lines are, where we really want to claw back those things, and starting with small steps. Everything doesn't happen at once, right? Set small boundaries to start with and then build from there. Once people understand, if I call you on a Saturday, you're not going to respond anyway, so I'll just wait till Sunday or I'll just wait till Monday, they're less likely to keep doing that.
But are there any policies or regulations set in place for these kind of things?
I mean, I think we'll see that there will be more in the future. I think it's kind of one of those gray areas where we have set timings around working hours. Mm-hmm. But technology, again, blurs that a little bit. So while there are rules around working hours, it really is sort of the gray space, I would say, and that's why it's kind of slides for so long.
Thank you so much. What we've heard is that being constantly on might look like commitment, but the truth is it often chips away at our well-being, our productivity, and even our relationship at work. A big thank you to Kristen Coakley for sharing such thoughtful insight from both the HR and employee perspective. And thank you to all of you for listening. If today's discussion made you pause and rethink your own boundaries, that's a step forward. Remember, success isn't about being available every second. It's about being present, intentional, and sustainable. Until next time, take care of yourselves and don't forget, it's okay to log off. Thank you so much.